Modern hits love to flaunt their budgets, their sweeping drone shots, and their polished stars. But here's the truth. Some of the greatest period dramas were made decades ago, and they blow most new shows out of the water. These are dramas that dug deeper, cut sharper, and dared to stay true to the messiness of history. Which ones still outclass the glossy newcomers? Let's dive into 15 forgotten masterpieces that deserve the crown. Middlemarch, 1994. Sometimes, the most explosive stories aren't about kings or wars, they're about ambition colliding with reality. That's Middlemarch, George Eliot's sprawling masterpiece, adapted in 1994 with a clarity and sharpness modern TV rarely pulls off. On the surface, it's about a provincial English town, but underneath, it's about frustrated dreams, suffocating marriages, and the crushing limits of social expectation. Juliet Aubrey leads as Dorothea Brooke, a woman desperate to live with purpose, only to find herself trapped in a disastrous marriage to a pompous clergyman who values dusty manuscripts over human connection. Alongside her is Douglas Hodge as Dr. Lydgate, another dreamer who comes to Middlemarch with plans to revolutionize medicine, only to be brought down by gossip, debt, and his own poor choices. Their stories intersect with layers of pettiness, scandal, and compromise that feel alarmingly modern. What makes this adaptation shine is Andrew Davies' script. Every line feels sharp, every subplot lived in. The cast is impeccable, Rufus Sewell shows up brooding as usual, and Patrick Malahide brings that signature unsettling presence. Even the smallest roles feel like people with full lives, not props. Here's the kicker. Middlemarch avoids the romantic gloss that bogs down so many adaptations. It's romantic, yes, but never sentimental. It shows love as complicated, ambition as messy, and morality as something that gets tested every day in small, brutal ways. That's why it still holds up. Forget the polished Netflix dramas. This one is as raw and real as period drama gets. The Mayor of Casterbridge, 1978. Imagine starting a story with the single worst decision of your life. That's Thomas Hardy's The Mayor of Casterbridge, and the 1978 BBC adaptation captures it with unflinching honesty. Alan Bates plays Michael Henchard, a man who drunkenly sells his wife and child at a country fair. By morning, he's full of regret, and he swears off drink for 21 years. Fast forward, and he's respectable, the mayor. But Hardy doesn't do redemption arcs, he does downfall. Bates is astonishing. His Henchard is proud, volcanic, and constantly his own worst enemy. Every attempt to make things right only digs him deeper. Anna Massey delivers a powerhouse turn as Lucetta, one of Henchard's former lovers, whose own attempts at survival get crushed by his reckless pride. Dennis Potter's adaptation doesn't soften Hardy's edges. Henchard isn't noble or misunderstood. He's messy, clumsy with emotions, and devastating to everyone around him. What's striking here is the pacing. It's slow, but deliberately so. The tension builds like a storm you can't escape until Henchard's downfall feels not just tragic, but inevitable. The muted landscapes of Dorset add to the weight. You can almost smell the mud and the ale-soaked air. Modern dramas often glamorize failure, making tragic heroes look noble. Not here. The Mayor of Casterbridge stares down shame, pride, and consequence with brutal honesty. Watching it is uncomfortable, but it's real. And it proves Hardy understood human frailty better than most writers before or after. Cranford, 2007 to 2009. Welcome to a small English village where nothing happens. Except, of course, everything does. That's Cranford, adapted from Elizabeth Gaskell's stories, and it's proof that quiet dramas can hit harder than sprawling epics. Judi Dench leads the ensemble as Miss Matty, gentle and fluttery on the surface, but with hidden steel. Around her swirl Eileen Atkins, Imelda Staunton, and Julia Mackenzie, each delivering razor-sharp turns as women navigating gossip, tradition, and looming change. The railway is creeping closer, threatening to shatter their carefully preserved way of life. And in the middle of it all, friendships are tested, secrets bubble up, and tragedies strike when least expected. What makes Cranford unforgettable is its attention to detail. The drama doesn't come from sword fights or political intrigue. It comes from gossip at the tea table, from small acts of kindness, from the painful weight of change pressing in on ordinary people. It's charming, yes, but it's also devastating. One minute you're laughing at a neighbor's stubbornness, the next you're floored by loss that feels almost too real. Visually, it's as polished as any big-budget drama, with lush costumes and lovingly recreated sets. But it never feels staged. Instead, it feels lived in, like you've been dropped into the heart of a real community. Modern period dramas often feel like showcases for costumes and cinematography. Cranford proves that the real power of the genre lies in human detail. Change is coming, whether the villagers want it or not, and watching them cling, adapt, or crumble is more gripping than any palace intrigue. It's small-scale drama at its absolute peak. The Tenant of Wildfell Hall, 1996. Anne Bronte didn't play nice, and neither does this adaptation. The Tenant of Wildfell Hall is one of the boldest novels of the 19th century, a story about a woman who walks out on a toxic marriage and starts over. In 1996, the BBC brought it to life with a gritty, fearless production that still feels radical. Tara Fitzgerald plays Helen, a woman who arrives at the dilapidated Wildfell Hall with her young son, immediately stirring gossip among the neighbors. Why is she so private? Why does she avoid company? The whispers grow until Gilbert Markham, played with earnestness by Rupert Graves, takes the time to look deeper. What unfolds is Helen's past, a chilling account of her marriage to Arthur Huntingdon, brought to life with sharp menace by Toby Stephens. This isn't the Bronte sister most people talk about, and maybe that's why it feels so fresh. The production refuses to soften Helen's ordeal or romanticize her choices. Instead, it shows the hard, grinding reality of survival in a world stacked against her. Tara Fitzgerald plays Helen with steel and quiet fury, never once begging for pity. What's striking here is the refusal to make Helen tragic for the sake of tragedy. She is resilient, resourceful, and utterly ahead of her time. That's what made Anne Bronte's novel controversial in the 1840s, and it's what makes this adaptation still feel more daring than many modern dramas. When people line up to praise Jane Eyre or Wuthering Heights, this story often gets sidelined, and that's a mistake. Because The Tenant of Wildfell Hall doesn't just entertain, it confronts. It's not cozy Bronte. It's Bronte with teeth. Bleak House, 2005. Dickens was never meant to be stuffy, and this adaptation proves it. Bleak House, one of his densest novels, became a BBC miniseries in 2005 that moved with the energy of a thriller. Forget endless tea scenes. This one hums with urgency. At the center is the never-ending Jarndyce v. Jarndyce case, a legal black hole swallowing lives for generations. Gillian Anderson is icy perfection as Lady Dedlock, haunted by secrets. Charles Dance prowls through the story like a predator, while Carey Mulligan, before her Hollywood breakthrough, brings heart to the chaos as Ada Clare. Add in Richard Griffiths, Alan Armstrong, and Phil Davis, and you've got a cast firing on all cylinders. What's genius here is Andrew Davies' adaptation. He knew Dickens wasn't meant to be slow. He sliced through the tangles and kept the pace tight, weaving murder, romance, corruption, and comedy into a single, driving narrative. Every subplot matters, every character feels fleshed out, and the tension never dips. Visually, it's stunning, Victorian grime and grandeur, captured with equal precision. The direction gives it a modern edge without losing authenticity, turning Dickens's labyrinthine story into something you can't stop watching. It picked up a Peabody, 10 Emmy nominations, and critical acclaim across the board. And yet, when people talk about the great adaptations, Bleak House doesn't always make the cut. That's a crime, because this isn't just one of the best Dickens adaptations, it's one of the best period dramas ever made. Madame Bovary 2000. Passion, boredom, and disaster served in corsets. Flaubert's infamous novel has been adapted plenty of times, but the BBC's 2000 version nails the tone better than most. Frances O'Connor is mesmerizing as Emma Bovary, a woman trapped in a dull rural marriage to Charles, played by Hugh Bonneville, who's so oblivious it borders on comedy. Emma craves excitement, romance, and beauty. She wants anything beyond the suffocating small-town routines and church socials. So she turns to novels, dreams, and eventually to choices that spiral into chaos. The supporting cast is packed with familiar BBC faces: Jessica Oyelowo, Hugh Dancy, Eileen Atkins, and they give the story texture that makes every moment land. What makes this version stand out is how unflinching it is. It doesn't glamorize Emma's escapism, nor does it reduce her to a caricature. Frances O'Connor plays her as complex, charming, and frustrating, selfish, and sympathetic. You feel her longing, her mistakes, and her slow unraveling. Visually, it's lush. The costumes are stunning, the Normandy countryside vivid, but it's not empty spectacle. The beauty contrasts with the bleakness of Emma's reality. And that's exactly the point. Other versions either romanticize Emma too much or punish her too harshly. This one finds the balance. It lets her story breathe, lets her contradictions exist, and lets the tragedy unfold naturally. If you want a period drama that doesn't sugarcoat, this is it. Madame Bovary reminds you that yearning for more often comes at a crushing cost. The Pickwick Papers, 1985. Before road trips were cool, Dickens had Mr. Pickwick bumbling across England. This 12-part BBC series takes his first novel and turns it into a rollicking period comedy that feels like comfort food, but with bite. Nigel Stock leads as Samuel Pickwick, founder of the Pickwick Club, joined by a band of fellow travelers who manage to stumble into one disaster after another. The charm here is the episodic nature. Each half-hour installment drops the crew into new scrapes, courtroom fiascos, drunken quarrels, shady lodgings, and plenty of slapstick misunderstandings. It's light, yes, but never shallow. The humor is rooted in Dickens's knack for exaggerating human folly until it feels both hilarious and painfully familiar. What makes this version stand out is how much texture it packs into the small screen. The travel diary framing works beautifully, giving you the sense you're wandering pre-railroad England alongside them. Stagecoaches rattle across muddy roads, inns creak with questionable hospitality, and every encounter reveals another slice of fading Georgian life. Modern adaptations often chase grit and gloom, but the Pickwick Papers reminds you that period drama can also be pure fun. It's nostalgic without being sugary, witty without being smug. And in a world where TV sometimes forgets how to do lighthearted adventure, this one feels like a rare gem. Dickens may have written it as satire, but this adaptation turns it into a time capsule of laughter and chaos. Tess of the D'Urbervilles, 2008. Thomas Hardy never promised happy endings, and this version doesn't flinch. Gemma Arterton anchors the BBC's 2008 adaptation with a performance that strips Tess down to raw humanity. She isn't romanticized, and she isn't simplified. She's hopeful, unlucky,